Hey everyone, it's Amber Lee Forrester with the Quartz Wellness Collective, and today we are speaking with Michele Brown of Intuaction Coaching. Hi Michele, how are you?
I'm good, Amber. How are you?
Great, great. Michele has been developing extraordinary leaders for over a decade as an executive coach and talent management consultant. Michele is also my coach and my dear friend. She has helped me in my career transition and been an absolute jewel as I've been able to reflect and go through this journey with her. And so a part of our reason for speaking with her today is to give some insight into careers and into knowing when it's time to pivot, and also knowing if we're in the right career and using our strengths properly. Michele is big on being spirited at work. Right, Michele? So
Yes.
yeah, can you tell us, if we can open there, can you tell us a bit about a spirited executive or being spirited at work, just to get us started?
Absolutely. That phrase actually came to me about a year or so ago with so many of the clients that I'm fortunate enough to support. I have found a distinction between those who are really feeling satisfied and fulfilled in their role, either as gainfully employed or even as business owners, against those who are just sort of flatlined, where they're going to work every day purely for the compensation. And what I define as the spirited executive or the spirited worker are those who have found their passion to some extent. I think we are all on the journey of wanting to spend, the 40 plus hours that we spend a week at work doing what motivates us, what gives us a sense of purpose. And the spirited exec is just that. And again, that term executive is not just for those that may be in a business or corporate setting, but it's spirited individuals who are really loving what they do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Excited to get to work every day.
Yes, and that's what we aim for, right? If we're going to spend that many hours of our life doing something, we should aim to love what we do.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, too few are doing that.
Very true. But I know that you are passionate. You're very passionate about your work as a coach and a trainer and talent management consultant. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So it's interesting. I was one of those individuals who, by society's definition, was successful by nature of the wonderful companies that I was fortunate enough to work in, the positions that I had ascended to. But I was not really feeling fulfilled. And one of the things that I uncovered was later on in my career. I had spent 25 years in corporate up until 12 years ago when I decided, as you mentioned, to pivot. And that was to help leaders or help individuals be better leaders. We oftentimes within a business or a company environment are promoted and ascend to higher levels by nature of our technical or functional expertise, whether we are great at numbers and finance or marketing or communications or research. Oftentimes organizations look at the results that we deliver and they promote us to a place where we have to actually manage people. So what I do as a coach and talent management consultant is to go into organizations to really help them work and develop their employees. Some of them, it could be leadership, but a lot of it is really just professional development. We call it customized polishing because coaching was actually born from sports, right? So when you think about being a high performing athlete in whatever sport you can identify, all of them have coaches, and it's really about helping them improve on what they're doing and be their ultimate best. So that's what we do with the individuals that we partner with in the organizations that bring us on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned sports because a lot of times when people hear coach, they think of a sports coach, but they don't understand all the time what a coach can do for them in
Mhm.
terms of helping them to reach their larger goals.
Mhm.
So I know that you have coached hundreds of people, if not thousands, over the years. And what are some of the strengths and values that you have noticed in your top performing clients?
The first thing in terms of strength is the ability for an individual to receive feedback. And number two, to be open and receptive to change.
Mm.
Those that are sort of stuck in their ways and don't necessarily want to gain insight into their blind spots, those are not the ones who either want to experience coaching or really derive the greatest value. So when individuals are really committed to their own development and want to get an objective outsider, such as myself, to kind of come in and I call it help peel back the layers of the onion, do a bit of excavation and exploration around, who they are and identify what they want to be so that we can close the gap. People who are closed off to that and don't have that as a strength aren't the ones that are going to gravitate towards partnering with a coach.
Yeah, and that process is so important, that awareness that we create around what our strengths are and what's best for us. And that's a part of what you help your clients to realize.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I call it customized polishing, because, these individuals we all have strengths, so it's trying to first identify what are the strengths that are important to an individual, and let's match that to what the position requires. And oftentimes there's a gap. And that's where it gives us an opportunity to kind of dive into where that gap is, whether it's, they don't communicate effectively, or if they're a leader, of a large team, but they're very reserved and introverted, how to really strengthen their people skills. So it's looking at what your strengths are, enhancing those, but most importantly, looking at what the position calls for and looking to make sure that that individual acquires or even increases their strengths around that skill.
And now you work with entrepreneurs as well. How does that apply to an entrepreneur who might not be a part of a larger organization?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I am an entrepreneur, having spent 25 years as an executive within, some enterprise-sized organizations. And what I have found over the years in coaching and partnering with entrepreneurs is they have this tremendous idea and this concept that they want to sort of dive right into. And they may not fully comprehend or understand how to run a business. It's a big difference to, we call it working in the business versus working on the business. So entrepreneurs, have these great ideas, something that they truly believe and have researched to validate that the market, whoever their audience is, wants and needs their product or service, but literally working the business and creating an infrastructure around operations and process is oftentimes what a entrepreneur may not have as a strength, right? So I look to help them develop that.
Yeah, and that's a whole different story when when you can't just call Tom from accounting and say, "Hey, can you get these numbers together for me?"
Exactly. I mean, you raise a really good
Entrepreneur.
point. Yeah, because I was talking to a colleague yesterday on a conference call, and the metaphor that I like to use is, when we start our business and we may not necessarily have the resources, we are executive chefs and bottle washers, right?
Yeah.
We have to do everything. So when we think about all the myriad of functions that go into running a viable business, marketing, sales, business development, research, these are hats that we have to wear, and we have to spend quality time developing those strategies, and not just delivering the product, but we have to kind of think about all those various functions. And it's not easy. The first couple of years of any new startup is one where we have to sort of flex our muscles and learn to be multitaskers in that regard.
Yes, very, very true. Even being a business owner, a seasoned business owner, as I go into the next phase of business, as over the last couple of years, as I've developed Quartz Wellness Collective, I've met with some challenges that I didn't experience in my other business, and constantly looking for growth and development and improvement in our personal and professional lives is major in moving us forward. I know as a coach, I'm a coach as well, a baby coach, building my coaching practice. But as coaches, we use some assessments and exercises to help people learn more about their strengths and the roles that are best fit for them. Are there any assessments and exercises that are available to the public, or even any that you highly recommend someone to seek out a certified facilitator of the assessments? Are there any that you recommend that people try to get to know themselves better and create awareness around their strengths?
Yeah, there's a myriad of assessments out there. I think, one of the most well-known is Myers-Briggs, right? That is what I was initially introduced to. But beyond that, there's DISC, which is an acronym for understanding your behavioral style, your communication style. There's Berkman, there's Enneagram. I mean, there's just a host.
For the ones that you're mentioning, can you just mention what you mentioned Myers-Briggs at first, and exactly what Myers-Briggs focuses on, and the other assessments that you're listing, what they focus on as well?
Sure. Well, Myers-Briggs really is a personality assessment. It really helps you underscore and uncover 4 aspects of your personality, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're task or people, whether you are perceptive or they call it, I think the J stands for judgment, kind of abstract versus concrete. Mm-hmm. So that's MBTI. DISC looks at one aspect of your personality, which again, as I mentioned, is more about your communication or your behavioral style. The others, I mean, there's a litany of others, and it's hard for me because I'm not certified in them. I'm just aware of them somewhat superficially, but they're really from Berkman to Enneagram to MBTI. They're somewhat similar in the sense that they look at the various aspects of who we are as individuals. Some of them will measure your strengths, whether you are a driver or whether you are a follower. There's no disadvantage or advantage to being anything, right? Because innately we all have these varying aspects, but it's understanding who we are so that with that insight and understanding, we can perform our job that's best suited for what our makeup is. That's the best way to explain it.
So we can build on our strengths and
yes.
look around what's good about us and where. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And you're right, not only build on the strengths, but what I found as a coach, especially with doing career coaching and some leadership coaching as well, is sometimes we're not a fit for the position. Meaning, we come out of college and we are pursuing a path based on what our major may have been or what our family tradition has been. I'll give you an example. I had a client many years ago who was a very successful attorney. And he came to me because, he was just sort of grappling with his level of satisfaction. And he was a good attorney, but he just wasn't as passionate about it as he was when he came out of law school. And through the assessments and a lot of conversation, we were able to uncover that when he was in undergrad, he really wanted to open up his own bakery. And his parents said, there's no way with his high intellect, and his father was a judge, that he was going to, be a baker. I mean, they literally thought that that was such a trivial career pursuit. So by reason of, rationale and a bit of strong encouragement by his family, he went down this path of becoming a lawyer. And again, he was successful at it, but it just was not as fulfilling. So I literally, and I've done this quite often, I coached him out of a job Because I said the reason potentially that you are beginning to become stagnant is because this is not really what your soul's purpose is. This is not something that really gives you a greater sense of passion. So with a bit of re-engineering throughout the coaching towards the tail end, he crafted a business plan, and I could really see the light bulb going off. He really started to get excited about what his next chapter was going to be. And interestingly enough, like any of us who make a career transition, he was able to parlay and leverage all of what he had done as an attorney, his education, his experience, his business acumen, and apply it to opening up a bakery. And that's what he did.
And I'm sure he was so much more happy and fulfilled once he did that and went after what he was really passionate about. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
It's so interesting with extrinsic motivation and looking to satisfy people outside of ourselves. It often doesn't satisfy what we need, and so it's important to recognize that. And that leads me to our next question. There are, I'm sure, some people who will be watching this who are thinking, am I in the right area of work? Do I need to stay at this job? Should I go for this business? Should I completely scrap what I've done and start over again in another area? So when do you know that it's time for a pivot in your career? And what are the steps that you should be willing to take to move forward at that point?
Okay, so the answer to the latter is, how do you know? I mean, it's a sense of dissatisfaction, not really feeling motivated anymore. You know, I always believe our soul and our spirits talk to us by nature of our emotions. You know, when we're enthusiastic, we know. When we flatline, we know. Oftentimes we try to talk ourselves out of those emotions, but they're real. And, you know, I certainly look to help my clients put a megaphone, you know, to that, and really pay attention to those emotions. So that's the first thing. And then the second is, you know, how they uncover. Is that the former question? It's how do they make the transition, or?
Well, how do they, well, you answered the first question of how do they know when it's time to pivot? And once they do say, okay, I'm dissatisfied, I'm fed up, I don't want to do this anymore, what steps should someone take at that point?
Well, it's the first step after you have demonstrated the courage to make the change, because sometimes that's the hardest thing. You know, we get to sort of this flat line, but then it's like, but how can I abandon you know, all of the years that I've spent, or the amount of money I've spent on my education, or if it's something completely new, if you're starting a business having been gainfully employed and can't afford to be at a zero net income, right? It's how do I experience the courage to take that leap of faith? That's the second. And then the third is, you know, it's write a plan. It doesn't have to be this, you know, multi-page business plan, but create and take it out of your brain and onto paper. That's the one thing, you know, because we can process ideas in our heads, but unfortunately the naysayer in us, the lower part of ourselves, our consciousness, oftentimes will just negate and tell us, no, that's not a great idea. But when we put it on paper, it just makes a lot more sense. But to be very practical, in an effort to say, well, what is that business? What is it that I want to do? What's that vocation? What's that position? It doesn't have to be a business, you know, if they choose to not want to be an entrepreneur, and really kind of map out. I never encourage anyone to sort of, you know, jump ship immediately because they've had this aha moment and now they know what they want their next chapter to be, but really meticulously develop a plan. And not only a plan of what that new position might be or what that new business might be, but let's create strategies of how you're going to get from where you are to ultimately where you want to be. It's all just a process and an effort in planning, because it could take 3 months, 6 months, a year, but you want to make sure that it's well thought out.
Yes. So for your happiest clients, for your most successful clients, what are some of the character traits or personality traits or strengths that you notice about them?
Well, It goes back to the earlier question with regard to those that may even gravitate to coaching. I think the happiest are those who are willing to do the work on themselves. And that oftentimes in and of itself is what gives them a sense of satisfaction. They want to know what they don't know about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they want to peek behind the curtain. They are vulnerable and authentic enough to be able to not only look at themselves in the mirror to underscore what their developmental areas are and, you know, polish their strengths, but most importantly, bring on a objective second party, myself as a coach, because coaching can be a very humbling experience because you're exposing yourself. If you really want it to work, you have to be willing to be honest and open and transparent. So I would say those that are the happiest or get the most out of coaching are those that are saying, you know, I don't want to be disingenuous. I don't want to project this image of having it all. I don't have it all. I want to know what I may be missing, and I'm willing to commit to finding that out. Those are the happiest ones, I think. And secondly, and most importantly, throughout the coaching process, the happiest ones are the ones that sort of have this aha moment of they're beginning to be on the right track. And certainly if within the time frame that I work with them, they're able to achieve their goals. Well, I mean, it's like winning the Olympics. It's like winning a gold medal, right? Because, or being the MVP, winning a championship. It's when you're able to accomplish that goal that may have been a very arduous process. They can really see the merits of their efforts.
Yes, yes. So whether climbing the corporate ladder or going out as an entrepreneur, we are aiming to be good leaders in our areas of expertise. What constitutes a good leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, you know, leadership comprises so many attributes, but most importantly, to be a good leader, there's a number of things. I'll start with, you have to be a people person, because leadership is a behavior. It has nothing to do with the level that we have within an organization. You know, whether you're a director or a member of the C-suite, leadership is about motivating and inspiring people to do a task that oftentimes is arduous. Sometimes they may even see it as impossible, but by nature of your ability to articulate a vision for what it is that the organization wants, they're able to motivate that individual because they figured out what's in it for that individual. Mm. It's the WIIFM, what's in it for me. So uber leaders, right? Ultimate incredible leaders aren't just task-oriented. They have figured out what motivates each person that they may be leading, and figures out, okay, what's in it for that person? What is going to motivate that person to spend 40, 45 hours a week, to
70 hours a week.
Right, yeah. To be, you know, rejected when it comes to if they're in sales. And that their ability to influence, to inspire, it's really about people, because we're not robots, and you can't just point someone to, you know, a task or a goal line. It's about, you know, working with them, developing them, encouraging them, inspiring them, being that champion and that cheerleader. I think those are really the essential elements of what makes a good leader. Yeah. And having a vision and being able to articulate that vision so that people can clearly see where they're headed and what's expected of them.
I love that, being able to identify the what's in it for me. That is so key. Yeah, because that is what motivates, and that's a part of being a leader, is to understand what motivates your team. I love that. Okay, now speaking of teams, let's spend a few moments on millennials, because there's so much talk about millennials in the workplace now. What are you noticing about millennials, how they're fitting into the workplace, and any advice that you have as a millennial who's either going into work or as an entrepreneur, how they can develop themselves?
Got it. Well, first, I want to, on behalf of, baby boomers such as myself, I want to apologize to millennials because I really believe that millennials have gotten such a negative reputation as a generation of self-entitled individuals. And, I don't really believe that every generation has its own makeup, right? So that's the first thing. They have a lot to offer. They are forced to be reckoned with. I mean, right now, they're, as the baby boomers are retiring out, millennials are going to represent the largest share of any work environment. But, what I would suggest to them is look at the big picture in terms of, because millennials do a great job of asking the question for themselves, what's in it for me, right? This is why, unfortunately, they have a bad reputation, because some of them are so individually focused. So it's really having a bigger concern about understanding what your employer's vision is, what the mission is, and looking to say, okay, with what my company is and does, what brand promise they have, how can I best apply my talents, my skills, and my God-given abilities? How can I make the biggest contribution within that? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of in a very broad sense. That's the initial advice and suggestion I would give to millennials.
That sounds like great advice. As the oldest millennial, one of the oldest millennials on the end of the spectrum where I'm teetering Generation X, I received that advice, and that's very good. So in closing, will you share with us a bit of your wisdom and some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in your career going from corporate to being an entrepreneur and now supporting executives, management teams, and entrepreneurs in their development?
Yeah, it's, when I look back, I would say, and I didn't know it then, and certainly I've uncovered it now, it's our career path is not a straight line, nor is it, sort of illustrated by a ladder of ascension. Your career is going to take a lot of twists and turns. And there are, I mean, for me, I was fired twice, throughout my 25 years, not by cause, but, because of organizational restructuring. And I beat myself up, not recognizing that when that door closed, it was really opening me up to an opportunity. So it's recognizing that, your career path is sort of a journey, and to as best you can stay optimistic when you may have a boss that, you don't like, or that may not be the most inspirational boss. There's a reason that that person has crossed your path, number one. So that may not always be the time to exit stage left. It may be an opportunity for you to practice influencing skills, or what they call managerial courage. When it comes to career advancement, it may not always be as available. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's time to jump ship. One of the things that I often tell so many of my millennial clients and colleagues and friends is, you have to pay your dues. So you can't be in a position for 6 months and expect an immediate promotion. You have to work at it and earn it. So again, the wisdom that I uncovered throughout my own tenure was it's not a straight line. There's just a lot of ebbs and flows and pitfalls in one's career, but every experience that you have, trust me, it pays huge dividends if we are honest enough with ourselves to look at what is this experience intended to teach me, and how can I benefit from this experience, especially if it's an unfavorable one, like being terminated, working in an environment where the culture is not healthy, or, for whatever reason, you get downsized.
I'm hearing some top strengths and areas of focus. I'm hearing resilience, I'm hearing passion, I'm hearing vision, awareness, and a willingness to work on yourself are all very important ways of thriving in your career. And that is wonderful advice from a veteran who knows well.
Yes. I'm still figuring it out. Trust me, Amber, I'm still figuring it out.
We're all
I have to take my own medicine.
We're all a work in progress. And you just said it. And that's so beautiful that you just said that. I think that's a part of the compassion that we have for ourselves throughout our career, is that we're still figuring it out. And even the people who look like they have arrived and they are in the best place ever, in their mind, they're still thinking about the next step and what's next. Absolutely. And so that compassion, that resilience, that dedication is a part of what really we need to embody within ourselves to help us in moving forward.
Absolutely. One last thing I'll add, because it just sort of came to me, is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Right? Yeah. I mean, that sort of runs through, because we, oftentimes as women in particular, we're perfectionists, and society has, dinged us oftentimes with judgment and criticism when mistakes are made, but that's where growth is born. Yes. So it's not being afraid to make mistakes.
Yes, definitely. I mean, as the millennials would say, you could drop the mic with that one.
I love it. I love it.
Michele, thank you so much for your time today and our conversation. I think that this will give some clarity to the people who are watching. And if they would like to know more about you and what you do, they can find you at www.intuactioncoaching.com. That's INTU actioncoaching.com. And are there you're also active on Instagram and Facebook as well?
Yes, and Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yes, I'll provide your handles in the comment section of this video. But thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Amber. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love the conversation.
Yes, and we can't wait to speak more with you. You'll be joining us tomorrow for the 40-Day Flourish, and we are excited about that. I'm sure they'll have a lot of great questions for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.